and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight and for taking time to engage in the work that we are doing. Your voice matters, and we welcome you, and we're glad you are here. With that, City Clerk, are you ready for the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Malakutian.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Breyer.
Here.
Councilmember Bhargava.
So used to the B.
Sorry.
New B. Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Newenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Sumadoria. Thank you.
Councilman Robinson, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Yes, please join me and stand if able. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have two proclamations today. One is Martin Luther King Jr. Day that Councilmember Breyer is going to read. And we have Troll Johnson, Vice President of the Bellevue Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, who is going to receive that after she finishes reading the proclamation. Please go ahead.
Certainly. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to the pursuit of justice, equality, and human dignity, reminding that nation that justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and that meaningful progress requires tireless effort and the persistent commitment. And whereas, while Dr. King's leadership helped inspire transformational change, many of the inequities he sought to eliminate, including disparities in health, education, housing, and economic opportunity, continue to challenge our collective responsibility to advance equity. And Dr. King's call to embrace the fierce urgency of now remains a powerful and enduring reminder that building a just and inclusive society requires immediate action and sustained commitment. Whereas on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we honor Dr. King's extraordinary legacy and recognize the transformative impact of his leadership in advancing civil rights, challenging systemic injustice, and inspiring service to others. And whereas the City of Bellevue remains committed to fostering a community grounded in access, equity, and inclusion, recognizing these principles as essential to creating the beloved community envisioned by Dr. King. And Bellevue continues to honor Dr. King's life and legacy through meaningful community events, including the annual local celebration and health fair at Crossroads Bellevue on January 19th, 2026, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., and encourages residents to participate in the National Day of Service to honor his memory through action. Now, therefore, I, Councilmember Noreen Breyer, on behalf of Mo Melekutian, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim January 19th, 2026 as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. In Bellevue, and call upon all residents to reflect on Dr. King's legacy, engage in acts of service, participate in the city's MLK Day events, and visit mlkday.gov to discover additional opportunities to serve their community and beyond.
Thank you so much. Please.
Thank you. My name is Theryl Johnson. I'm a Vice President of Bellevue Alumni Chapter. I'd like to thank the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council members for this proclamation. Today is also a special day for our sorority. January 13, 1913, 22 college-educated women founded our sorority on the campus of Howard University. They were dedicated to public service and social action, and one of their first events was the Women's March for Suffrage. So we are definitely social-minded community organization, and we look forward to working with you on this MLK Health Fair. And we hope that all of you will be in attendance in this health fair. We support the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and will continue to do so. So once again, on behalf of Bellevue Alumni Chapter, I'd like to thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you so much. If you go back to your seat and stay here, we can do a picture after the end of second proclamation. Okay. Thank you so much. The second proclamation is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month proclamation. Councilmember Sumadoria will read that, and we have Captain Ben Jones from Bellevue Police to receive that. Please.
Whereas human trafficking is a pervasive crime involving exploitation of individuals through force, fraud, or cohesion, and affects communities nationwide, including here in Bellevue. And whereas the U.S. Department of Homeland Security estimates that millions of men, women, and children are trafficked worldwide each year, including thousands within the United States. And whereas human trafficking can affect anyone, but it disproportionately impacts vulnerable population as survivors of abuse, individuals experiencing poverty, housing instability, indigenous communities, LGBTQ plus individuals, people with disabilities, and undocumented immigrants. Traffickers also exploit instability caused by natural disasters or conflict, underscoring the need for equity and justice in anti-human trafficking efforts. And whereas the City of Bellevue is committed to protecting the safety, dignity, and freedom of all individuals and supports efforts to educate the public, raising awareness and strengthening prevention initiatives to eliminate this crime. These efforts are accomplished through the Bellevue Police Department and its Human Trafficking Unit. And whereas the City of Bellevue recognizes that everyone has a role in combating human trafficking by learning how to identify warning signs, reporting suspected activity, and support prevention and response efforts. And whereas National Human Trafficking Awareness Month provides an opportunity to recognize the scope and impact of human trafficking, honoring survivors, and reaffirming our shared responsibility to prevent exploitation and protect human dignity. Now, therefore, I, Claire Suma Devoria, on behalf of Mo Malakutian, Mayor of the City of Bellevue, Washington, and the City Council do hereby proclaim January 2026 as National Human Trafficking Awareness Month in Bellevue and urge all residents to remain informed, report suspected trafficking, support survivor-centered services, and contribute to community efforts that help prevent human trafficking and uphold human rights.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Malakutian, City Council. It's a privilege here to receive this proclamation on behalf of the Bellevue Police Department. We are fortunate to the City of Bellevue to have resources dedicated specifically for addressing human trafficking in the City of Bellevue. I want to thank City Council for taking a moment to recognize the impact that this crime has on individuals, families, and communities across the world. I would like to encourage people who are listening to learn more about human trafficking, more ways about how to identify it, but then also how to report it. The Bellevue Police Department would like to encourage people to contact us if they need help or if they know somebody who's being trafficked. The best way to contact the Bellevue Police Department is to call 911 if you're experiencing an emergency, or you can also call our non-emergency number, which is 425-577-5656. Your tip can make a difference. We also have an email address that people can send tips to as well. That is viceht@bellevuewa.gov. That's viceht@bellevuewa.gov. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's take a picture with you first. Congrats on the new camera. Very impressive. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
second.
It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion passed. City Clerk, are there any speakers sign up to provide oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This evening, there are 9 pre-registered speakers, but my quick review of the topics, we're only going to be able to hear from 7 of those folks, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that rule and others that the council has in place. So oral communications is for a period of no more than 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then, if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. In both of those categories, the presiding officer has preference or can give preference to those who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who will be speaking on topics that will come in front of the council within the next 60 days. Speakers are allowed to speak up to 3 minutes per person, and a maximum of 3 people are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. And we will have 3 speakers in support of the MFTE item, and so any additional speakers after those 3 would not be able to speak. Additionally, I want to remind folks that in compliance with Washington state campaign laws regarding the use of public facilities during elections, no speaker can support or oppose a ballot measure or support or oppose a candidate for election, which includes one's own campaign. Any speaker beginning to speak on that topic will be asked to stop. And one final note about tonight's agenda is under land use, which is item 11 on the council's agenda, there is a quasi-judicial rezone, and the council will not be able to hear any comments on that item as it is quasi-judicial and they cannot accept ex parte communications. So with that, I will call our first speaker, who's Patience Malaba. I believe is joining virtually. Ms. Malaba, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor Malakushan and council members. I am Patience Malaba. I am the co-chair of the East Side Housing Roundtable and CEO of the Housing Development Consortium. First, Happy New Year to you all. Congratulations to Mayor Malakushan and Deputy Mayor Hamilton. On your new roles. We are thrilled and excited to work with you in your new capacity. And a deep, deep gratitude to Mayor Robinson and Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse for your service over the years. In speaking tonight, we are strongly supporting the staff's proposed MFTE updates and recommendations. These recommendations are evidence-based, they're grounded in broad stakeholder consensus, and they're truly designed with rigorous analysis to keep projects feasible while we can continue to deliver more affordable, more mixed income housing in the city of Bellevue. We're particularly enthusiastic and supportive of the Wilburton MFTE Supercharger. I think as you've all seen, we have more than 2,000 units that are in the pipeline. The program has proven effective under really tough market conditions, and the staff rationale for choosing to focus the program in the area is one that is excellent and one that we respect and are supportive of. We also are supportive of the new programs that staff have included. One of those is the citywide 8-year MFTE program in areas with mandatory affordability. We believe that is one way to continue to be sure that projects can be feasible as we move forward the goal of affordable housing across the city. We're also supportive of the 20-year homeownership option. I think it's important for us to keep that goal alongside as we look at rental housing. We've got to support homeownership opportunities across the board. Looking ahead, we are truly glad that staff and city leadership, Diane, Bianca, and Robin, have committed to align MFTE code updates with land use code updates. We're looking forward to that. We believe that is the most strategic approach. It's coordination that is necessary to provide the certainty for developers to really feel like they can have the confidence in moving forward a healthy housing pipeline in the city. And I'll conclude with urging you as the council to adopt those recommendations after your discussions in the study session today, move the discussion
Ms. Mo-
forward, and let's continue to sustain Bellevue affordable
the-
housing pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
next speaker on the list is Joe Fain, who also is joining us virtually. Mr. Fain, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Your time begins now.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Malakushin, members of the council. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to our comments tonight. We're particularly appreciative of Bianca Siegel and Robert Schau for the work that they've done tirelessly on this issue over the last few months, and have really a great appreciation for the time that they have put particularly into the outreach with impacted members here in the community and the development community in particular. I'm also pleased to be here with my friend Patience Malaba, being able to testify jointly again on a key housing issue. Chamber and EHR are in support of these staff recommendations. We view these as really good immediate first steps in realizing, in particular, the promise of the Wilburton rezone that was passed earlier this year. 2025 was a terrible year for permit applications on housing, and particularly multifamily housing across the U.S., but particularly here in Washington State. But even with some of the interest rates and macroeconomic conditions that were driving down permit applications, you still saw regions like Phoenix generate permit volumes that were twice the rate per capita that the greater Seattle area generated, and Austin is 3 times the rate of what the greater Seattle generated per capita. So you can see that we still have a long way to go in addressing some of the policy hurdles that are slowing down the production of that needed housing stock. And this MFTE supercharger that's being adopted, hopefully, or is being recommended in the Wilburton sub area, will go a long way in bucking that trend, and has already done so just on the promise of its potential adoption, seeing a great number of applicants that are put in the pipeline. I reiterate my colleagues' request and appreciate the commitment from staff about bringing forward future MFTE policy changes at the same meeting and at the same time as future rezones, so that we can adjust those all together and avoid the kind of 6 months lag that we experienced here. And I think that that's an appreciated position by staff. And then additionally, it's important that we have a key principle as we walk into these rezones, and that is the idea that these codes work for the development community, work for housing providers on day one. Too often in these rezones, in many jurisdictions, they bet on the come, and they create policies that are intended to work in the future or require incredible amounts of rent increases before they're viable. And that certainly is something that we don't have time to wait for, and would not want to build policies around. So again, we commend these to you. Again, appreciate staff and urge your support.
Thank you. The
Thank
next
you.
speaker on the list is Brady Nordstrom, excuse me.
Greetings, City Council, Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Brady Nordstrom, and I am with the Housing Development Consortium and also the East Side Affordable Housing Coalition. We work together as organizations on the East Side that build, operate, and advocate for affordable housing, and that includes Bellevue, of course. So I'll just echo what Joe and Patience were saying. Again, I think I don't need to put too much an emphasis on that because they did such a great job already. We're here to support the staff proposal this evening. It's well supported. There's a lot of great rationale there. And the Eastside Housing Roundtable letter that represents a cross-sectoral agreement on a path forward for MFTE. In addition to the alignment there, I wanted to comment on a couple other pieces from the affordable housing side and for these future updates as the city is looking at these other areas. So first of all, it's already been covered, but MFTE should be updated in tandem with an expanded with these land use code updates. And affordable housing requirements. Staff analysis shows that neighborhood upzones do offset the cost of that affordable housing. Still, MFTE is a critical complement that can really support both development overall and the affordability levels there. And so you bring these together and you're able to look at the analysis as a full and then figure out where that dial should be for the city for all of these goals that are interconnected. And I think that this is not automatically assuming what that's going to look like. It's calibrating on the neighborhood specific goals going forward. We know that, just to brag on the current program that exists in the city, from the city analysis, the current program is working as an incentive, even with the double counted units. There's one project that's used that, but in a voluntary basis. It shows there's something to that. Of course, the majority of projects have used the clean MFTE there. But I guess then I'll just conclude by putting the focus back on the people that use these MFTE units. The average MFTE tenant makes 56% AMI. If the program is targeted just to 80% AMI, we're looking at a cost burden there. So overall, we just appreciate the ongoing work and the ongoing conversation between council, staff, external stakeholders, the community at large. And so again, we support the package. We look forward to partnering with you, and thank you for your values-driven leadership and for the deep care for a balanced affordable housing package in the future. So just appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That was our third and final speaker who will be able to speak in support of the MFTE item on tonight's agenda. So our next speaker on the list is Jessie Clausen, who is joining us virtually. Ms. Clausen, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Malakutian and council members. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm talking about parking initiation today. As you begin the process of updating Bellevue's parking code, I urge you to take the most expansive approach possible. The current code is severely outdated, not just in TOD areas or urban centers, but citywide. If the scope of this work is too narrow, we will miss opportunities to support small businesses and align regulations with the Bellevue of today. Please expand the scope of the parking code changes to citywide. One clear example is the restaurant parking requirement. Any restaurant that offers takeout service, which is basically any restaurant today, is required to provide 16 stalls per 1,000 square feet, which is the highest ratio I've seen anywhere in the Puget Sound region. Requirements like this do not reflect real behavior, and they make it nearly impossible for restaurants to locate in existing buildings or in locations in Bellevue that don't have space for massive parking fields. This is an issue that we're actively contending with in a downtown tower, as well as in other commercial areas. It comes up much more than you think. It needs to be fixed. These outdated ratios also block other types of businesses. In the Richards Road industrial area, we are working with a biotech tenant that would have no more than 15 people on site at any time, yet the parking code requires over 100 stalls of parking. The existing building only has 70 stalls, and it's in a critical area, so it can't provide additional parking stalls in the location. Bellevue may lose an employer doing groundbreaking research and development simply because of an outdated parking formula. The visitor parking requirement, the residential visitor parking requirement, is another vestige of a suburban area that no longer represents how Bellevue lives or travels. Removing it would also reduce unnecessary site constraints and development costs. It should also be addressed citywide. Across all land use categories, the message is consistent. Mandated parking minimums do not reflect actual need. Businesses know when they need parking and when they don't. They self-select into buildings and locations that meet their operational needs. If parking is essential and a site can't provide it, they simply won't lease the space. This is exactly why the market is better suited to determine parking demand than rigid ratios. I encourage the council to direct staff to take a comprehensive citywide look at the parking code. Modernizing these standards will support economic vitality, small business retention, and a more flexible, future-ready Bellevue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next three registered speakers, I believe, want to come up together, though you each will only have 3 minutes to speak. That's Jack Shannon, Keen Thompson, and Douglas Smith. Welcome. If you can just state your name before speaking so we know who is speaking. Thank you.
Jack Shannon. I've asked to say some words about the South Maidenbower Reservoir project. My home for 40 years has been 407 94th Avenue Southeast. Utilities plans a very large buried reservoir in my greenbelt, in my neighborhood. Greenbelt is home to a large variety of animals: deer, bobcat, ducks, children, dogs, neighbors. The buried reservoir provides ultimate security for drinking water and allows the top surface for other values, such as I just mentioned. Seattle has 6 such reservoirs with the park on top. Characteristic of the Seattle parks is minimum fencing, minimum buildings, and vegetation. The comparable, they use a open space philosophy. Comparable for us, it's COPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. Both philosophies say keep the space open such that first responders can see who's there and what's going on. When I say Seattle has minimum fencing, the most property taken by a fence in a Seattle property is about 2%. For us, it's 32. In the middle of that 32% is planned a bare concrete building. The code requires that any building be compatible with the architectural form of surrounding buildings. We don't have any bare concrete homes in my neighborhood, certainly none with 750 feet of fencing. So what's happened here is, in order to get utilities to provide safe drinking water, we've compromised our system just a little bit. The difference between what we're doing and what Seattle has done is Seattle has used a landscape architect to design the final product. We rely on utilities. Utilities is a grand group of engineers providing a reliable, safe system for drinking water for generations to come. They're not architects, they're not designers, they're not landscapers. And for us to rely on them to provide that source is the wrong thing to do. Jay Hummel, project manager, says we do not do cosmetics. If that property is going to survive anywhere near the semblance of what it is today, we need to ask you to promote, encourage, support utilities hiring, contracting with an independent design architect for the final product. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having us here this evening. My name is Keen Thompson, and I live at 702 94th Avenue Southeast. I moved into the neighborhood in 1960 with my family, so I've been here for quite a while. The utility department is in the planning process for the Maidenbower South Reservoir, a 6 million gallon, fully buried reservoir adjacent to my property. This will require the digging of a 200-foot diameter hole, 45 feet deep, the edge of which will be 100 feet from my bedroom. Thus my interest in the project. I provided the clerk with a document that details the history of the site and plans for the new reservoir. It also details my and the neighborhood's concerns about the project. We were first approached about the project. When we were first approached, we told the city that as the neighborhood group, we were in favor of it if we continued to have access to the site as we have had for the last 20 years. The city stated that, I quote, "A new reservoir in your neighborhood would have impacts on you and your neighbors, particularly during construction, but we are interested in finding ways that it might offer meaningful, long-term benefits to the neighborhood as well, if the site is selected." Well, the site has been selected, and so far no benefits have been planned. Quite the contrary. A third of the site is proposed to be fenced, blocking access and views. Utilities has simply pulled off-the-shelf plans, plopped them down into the center of the site with no regard for neighborhood benefits. Please read my provided documents that includes a letter from utilities debunking our suggestion of concrete hatch covers and less fencing. From what I can tell, they have not done any research on alternative security hatch covers as we have asked. Where are our meaningful long-term benefits? I'm holding utilities, the city, and you, the city council, to your word, and will be fighting for those promised benefits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Doug Smith, and I'm here tonight in support of the messages delivered by my neighbors, Keene Thompson and Jack Shannon, regarding the South Maidenbower Reservoir Project. My family and I reside at 9701 Southeast 7th Street. I want to begin by emphasizing something important. For several years, our neighbors have engaged with the Bellevue Utilities Department in good faith. We have shown up consistently, we've reviewed technical materials, we've offered alternatives, and we've tried to be constructive partners, not adversaries. This has not been a last-minute objection or a reactionary concern. It has been a long-running effort by residents who care deeply about our community, public safety, infrastructure integrity, and the long-term character of Bellevue. Over that time, we've heard repeatedly that fencing is the only viable solution to meet operational and security needs. Yet through our own research and examples from peer cities, we've demonstrated that secure and regulatory compliant reservoirs can exist and coexist with open, natural, community-oriented spaces. Spaces that protect infrastructure and provide environmental and civic value. There has not been sufficient exploration of alternatives in this case. At this point, what we are asking for is not a redesign mandate, but council oversight, influence, and process guidance. Specifically, we respectfully ask the council to focus on 3 next steps. First, we ask the council to request an independent review of design alternatives, including non-fencing or hybrid security approaches used successfully in other cities with comparable reservoirs. This would provide an objective framework beyond a single departmental lens. Second, we ask for council overview and input, taking community feedback into consideration before final design decisions are locked in. Third, we ask the council to ensure that this project is evaluated not only as a utilities facility, but as part of Bellevue's broader goals around open space, environmental stewardship, and livability, values this council has consistently championed. This is a rare site, elevated, green, and overlooking our city. With thoughtful oversight, it can remain a secure water asset and become a shared civic space that reflects Bellevue at its best. We appreciate the work of the utility staff, and we appreciate your time tonight. What we are asking for is your leadership to help bridge the gap between technical delivery and community-centered outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That is the last speaker on our pre-registered list. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone else joining us this evening who would like to make a comment to the council, please raise your hand. That goes for those folks online as well. And just one final reminder, no additional speakers on support of the MFTE program or on our quasi-judicial item. Okay, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Charmaine. Again, thank you so much for everyone in person or via Zoom shared your concern with us. We really appreciate that. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passed. We have our,
Deputy Mayor.
yes.
Jeez, I'm gonna have to break myself.
Oh, report of the city. Great, yes.
Yeah, you skipped over the city manager report.
Diane, I'm sorry. We have a report of the city manager.
Thank you very much, Mayor Malkoutian. We do have one report tonight. It is the second week of January, which means the legislature has begun as of yesterday. So I'd like to invite Katie Kusimba-Halsey, our intergovernmental director, assistant director for intergovernmental relations, and introduce Diana Hart. Diana is our new state relations policy advisor. She has been on board a little over a month, I want to say. Okay, about that. They're here tonight to just give you an overview of what's happening in the session, what's anticipated to happen, and then how the staff as well will be working to support the city's legislative positions in the very short session. With that, I'll hand it over to Katie.
Mayor,
Mayor Malakouchian, Deputy Mayor Hamilton, and council members, I'm Katie Kasimba-Halsey. I am the Assistant Director for Intergovernmental Relations, but I am really supported by an incredible team in Intergovernmental Relations, which just got one team member bigger. Let me just refresh your memory that we have 3 regional policy advisors, we have 1 federal and international policy advisors, and now Diana, who's our state relations policy advisor. Diana has a really strong background working with cities, including Kirkland and Woodinville and Duval, and now the best one of all. And she also has experience in working down in the state legislature. So we've got a real home run in hiring Diana. I'm going to move on and tell you a little bit more, and then I'm going to hand it over to Diana. So first of all, I wanted to mention this is information only. Normally, we love to answer your questions and get into the details of the legislative session, but this is the city manager's report. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we'll continue to engage, even if questions today isn't available. I'm going to hand it over to Diana for the agenda.
Good evening, Council. So tonight, we're going to briefly touch on expectations for this upcoming legislative session, review Bellevue's legislative agenda, a really quick touch on EWC's legislative agenda, and talk next steps for the next 60 days of legislature. The 2026 legislative session began yesterday, and this will be a short 60-day session, which will go by in a blink of an eye and end on March 12th. Short session is the time for legislators to make necessary budget adjustments from the budget they adopted last session and in reflection of caseload and revenue projection changes. The legislature will also take up considerations of new policies and programs. Any of the hundreds of bills that they considered last year that were not adopted are available for consideration this year, in addition to any of the hundreds of bills that they may introduce this session. On a sense of scale, in the last couple of weeks during pre-filing, the legislature dropped more than 500 bills. So we are busy at work, even though session just started yesterday. As we look at this current political climate, this last election cycle was a unique one where we had a larger number of state races on the ballot. This was due to all the appointments that we saw last session. This did not change Bellevue's legislative delegation and did not change the legislature's makeup politically. This upcoming general election will have an impact as we see every member of the House and half of the members of the Senate up for election this coming November. That typically means that the legislature is likely to get out on time as they are unable to participate in their campaigns when they're in session, and they're less likely to consider tax policies and new complicated proposals. However, we have seen a really big turnover in the legislature in the last couple of years, so that sort of more tradition may be less entrenched than it's been in the last, or we've seen historically. As we look to hot topics this year, we'll continue to see a big focus on the budget. Last year, there was substantial work done to fill the roughly $16 billion shortfall the state was experiencing over the 4-year outlook. The legislature will still have to grapple with a more than $2 billion shortfall that they have to fix in this supplemental budget cycle due to projected revenues declining and increases to program caseload. The caveat that shortfall doesn't include any new proposals that they may consider this year, so they'll have to play with potentially new revenues, program cuts, or revenue adjustments to fill in that gap. As the legislature explores program adjustments and transfers, we do expect that they'll consider new proposals as part of that. A payroll tax proposal has already been introduced this session, and the governor has thrown his support behind an income tax on individuals earning more than $1 million a year. The state has also indicated an interest in responding to federal actions by the federal government that have reduced funding and changed programs that have historically benefited Washingtonians. This is most directly seen on the human services front. A lot of those impacts has resulted in a prioritization of preservation, or at least minimizing the reductions to Washingtonians, especially those that are most in need. Any of which will just exacerbate the budget shortfall that the legislature will have to consider, which again has that sort of ripple effect to other ongoing programs considered by the state. We're also continuing to see a focus on housing affordability. The legislature has adopted a lot of legislation in this space over the last handful of years. We're continuing to see a focus from members in this space as there continues to be a shortfall of affordable homes in our region. The legislature has introduced a lot of new bills around this already, and we've seen the governor throw support behind a new Office of Housing. And with that, I will turn things back to Katie to talk about our legislative agenda.
Thanks. So you may recall, except for Councilmember Breyer, back in October of 2025, we approved the 2026 state legislative agenda. And we're looking forward to working with you and each of our council members in implementing and working with legislators on the legislative agenda. You may remember at that time that we have the key legislative priorities and then the state policy statement. I always get myself tripped up on that. I'll talk a little bit more about each. For the key legislative priorities, those are the areas that city staff and we hope the council members will really focus on in 2026. They are issues that Bellevue will really champion, whereas other issues might be championed by an association or other groups. These are really our key priorities, including economic prosperity and partnership, really requesting that the legislature proposes, if they propose new revenues or any kind of reduction in the budget, that they consult with Bellevue and other cities on that. Also, affordable housing, that's been consistent in former years. Transportation, including the business access and transit lanes, and streamlined permitting, which includes our request for some funding for our pilot program that we've been establishing here in the city of Bellevue, and how we can utilize that for the eCity Gov. Next, we have the state policy statement. This is much broader and it provides some guidance for advocacy on policy issues where we may not be the lead, but we certainly may want to weigh in, whether that's support, oppose, or providing feedback on the legislation itself. We review hundreds of bills each session, and so we really rely on this state policy statement to guide our work so that we can be responsive and nimble in a very fast-paced environment. I also just want to reference that AWC also has a legislative priorities and a legislative agenda. Councilmember Neuenhaus served on the committee that really helped to influence this legislative agenda. And while we may not always be aligned with AWC, there are opportunities for us to really think about them as a resource. We also have opportunities to think about how we partner with other cities or organizations to be more effective on issues that we really want to share with the legislature. And finally, I just want to note that things are moving really fast already this session. We've got the AWC City Action Days that are scheduled for next week. And I want to thank Deputy Mayor Hamilton and Councilmember Suma Deweria for heading down to Olympia with us next week, and we're including some meetings with legislators at that time. And even if you aren't able to join us for that trip down to Olympia next week, there's plenty of other opportunities to be involved. We would love to engage you when we need a phone call or a person to testify or perhaps an email into a state legislator. And Diana will reach out to you when those opportunities are presented. And we also welcome you to let us know if you're finding opportunities that we should know about. And as I wrap up, I just want to acknowledge that this is the start of a conversation over the next 58 days and then some. We'll be sending you weekly updates every Monday. In fact, I think you just got one from Diana on Monday, yesterday. And those will be coming every Monday morning. We also would be happy to have additional conversations with you after those are sent. We also encourage members to sign up for AWC emails. Every Friday they have updates, that a podcast or a webcast that they provide. And then, of course, we'll be coming back to you if we need additional direction or feedback on policy issues that aren't already covered by our legislative agenda, and just for general updates. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much. We are also looking forward to working with you all. We already did approve our consent calendar, so City Manager, back to you for introducing our first study session out of the two that we have for tonight.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Our first study session is a presentation of parking reform, land use code amendment. And staff will provide the general scope and objectives of this land use code amendment. It is intended to implement changes mandated by the state, requiring local jurisdictions to adjust and limit the minimum parking standards, in addition to several other requirements. There are also some opportunities here through this land use code process to consider other changes that support or may support objectives of our comprehensive plan. So tonight, staff is seeking council direction to initiate this land use code and is also looking for some direction on the scope of this process. We have Rebecca Horner, our Director of Development Services Department, Nick Whipple, Code and Policy Director, and Sean Edgehill, Senior Planner. And with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. Rebecca Horner with Development Services. We're very excited to be here with me tonight. As mentioned, Nick Whipple and Sean Edgehill, who this is his first meeting before you tonight. So very excited to break him in on the parking reform. So our agenda tonight includes, we'll be seeking direction from council and scoping options, and we're going to lay before you a lot of different scoping options. So our request is to give us as much specific feedback as possible in your direction tonight so we can have clear guidance that we share with our stakeholders through the process. So our agenda tonight is to give a refresher to all of you on what is minimum parking. What does that mean? We'll also review with you 2 pieces of precipitating legislation that led to our work item tonight. We'll, like I said, go over a variety of scope options. You received some feedback during public comment time today, so there's definitely interest in what that scope looks like. We'll talk with you about our proposed community and stakeholder outreach and get your feedback on that as well. And then again, ask you for clear, specific direction on what you would like us to do with the work program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Great, thank you, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. So as Rebecca noted, we'll start first with just orienting us to what is minimum parking. Just a kind of a basic start here for this project. So minimum parking is a land use regulation. It applies to projects, developments, and their requirements are to provide a specified number of parking stalls off-street, so within their project, either a garage or a surface parking area, to accommodate any land use that they are proposing on their site. So that could be a residential project, so then the parking would be based off of the number of dwelling units. It could also be that they're doing an office project, and so then the parking is based off of the use in tandem with what's the floor area of that use. That's going to determine how much parking do you need to provide off-site, or off-street, rather. The historic purpose here is to prevent some spillover parking on nearby streets, make sure that there's parking available for users of that building, particularly during peak demand. The parking standards are generally based off of engineering manuals and standards, and typically would assume kind of a worst case peak demand. So Bellevue's parking history, we were able to locate at least the oldest zoning book that we have on site. That was from 1962, and opened that up to find that we had minimum parking requirements in 1962, and likely before then as well, when the city incorporated, I'm sure. What we also saw in looking through those 1962 regs is that they're largely similar to the regulations that we have on the books today, with the exception of when council has adopted changes for our TOD areas. We've updated the code over time, but the citywide parking standards mostly match what we saw in 1962. So that means that the underlying approach really reflects the development patterns and transportation assumptions of that era, which are a bit different today. So some examples there, we were able to see some uses that had parking assigned to it that were maybe more common during that period than they are today. Bowling alleys, airfields had parking requirements in dance halls. Those are maybe less common today, or at least have different labels. And then looking forward, the council did adopt, as you all know, an update to our comprehensive plan in October of 2024. This set the vision for the next 20 years in Bellevue. So that's really what's kind of directing some of this change as well. A lot of policy support around transitioning us to more transit-oriented development, leveraging that investment in high-capacity transit, the 2-line coming online. Also looking at ways to encourage flexible and context-sensitive parking standards. And then just an overarching theme, knowing that we have some pretty hefty growth targets to address, looking at opportunities to remove unnecessary barriers to redevelopment. Some of the challenges of having a 6 decades old parking standards, often we're seeing that more parking is required than what the current demand is necessarily wanting or supporting. We're also getting feedback that this is a cost driver for a lot of projects. So increasing that cost, also reducing some of the efficient use of our valuable resource of land. So we are seeing examples where surface parking is going in places where we might want a residential building. Limits some of the flexibility for housing, mixed use, and redevelopment projects, and also unintentionally reinforces some of the auto-oriented outcomes that aren't consistent with our current policy goals. As Rebecca noted, the state did provide some mandates or clarification on scope, I guess, for this code amendment. So there were 2 bills that were passed. In 2024, Senate Bill 6015 was passed, and then the following year, Senate Bill 5184 was passed. So with the first bill being passed in 24, that looked at more of the parking stall dimensions. It also spoke to some of the surface materials that cities can allow for parking stalls, and then clarified some rules around whether you can allow enclosed or unenclosed parking to meet the minimum requirements. And then the following year, last year, Senate Bill 5184 passed, and this was a broader bill that looked at reducing minimum parking requirements across the state. These bills do apply to future development, so they're forward-looking and would apply to residential, mixed-use, and commercial developments. We are looking at a compliance deadline of January 27th, 2027. So we do think if we can get this initiated tonight, that gives us adequate time to be able to do some effective outreach and really get to a good product for you all before the state-mandated deadline. So now I'll pass it to Sean. He's going to walk us through the specifics of each bill and then go through some scope options with you all.
Thank you, Nick. So with 5184, the main items that came through under this bill were largely that the minimum parking requirements that we were allowed to put forward are being reduced. Residential uses are being almost in half for most uses, unless there is usually like a 0 parking requirement associated with it. For multifamily, it is half a space per unit is now the highest that we can require for minimum parking. And for single family, it is now 1 instead of what has generally been the case for the last few years, which has been 2 spaces, usually to place within a 2-car garage. Commercial spaces are now to be reduced to 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. As mentioned previously during the comments, one of the larger changes that you would see from this would be for certain commercial uses such as restaurants, which historically have extremely high parking ratios, sometimes as high as 15 to 20 per 1,000 square feet. So to reduce it to 2 spaces is going to be a large change. For certain uses that kind of had those bigger amounts associated with them. On top of all of that, there are certain uses that we can't require minimum parking for. These do include smaller residences and commercial spaces, specialized housing such as affordable and senior housing, as well as ground floor commercial uses and conversions, non-residential to residential. In these cases, when we have a project brought forward that falls within one of these categories, we will not be allowed to apply a minimum parking requirement. That is not to say that there can't be any parking for that use, though. The developer could still put something forward. We're just not allowed to associate it with parking requirements. With 6015, this, as Nick had kind of already mentioned, was miscellaneous requirements were kind of associated with this. The largest one was that parking spaces themselves could not exceed a dimension of 8 by 20 square feet. And that does not apply to ADA stalls. Those are obviously applied to by a federal standard. But it also included allowance for tandem parking spaces, which are more of like being used more recently, but do include having agreements between two individuals that park one in front of the other. Front parking space generally has free use, whereas the rear one has to have an agreement with that front individual. Additionally, we cannot require that a parking space is either enclosed or unenclosed. This would be like if you had a multifamily development, and we might have requirements for garages, for example, to exist within the parking area. That could not be required of such a developer. Now, one item that we do want to address is that within 5184, there is an opt-out language in here, kind of off-ramp, as it were. It's a fairly high bar that comes with this. It would require that we supply the Department of Commerce with a empirical safety study, and the concerns with that are largely that it's an amorphous guideline that would be difficult to meet. If Commerce were not to be willing to approve what we supply them, it may result in us having a tighter deadline than the 1 year that we currently are scheduled for. That way, we're hoping to really be able to allow for this to move forward so that it is more in line with our policies within our comprehensive plan. Now, within our land use code, there are several portions that include parking requirements. The general one is within 2025-90. As mentioned by Nick, that is the section that largely hasn't changed in the last 6 decades. But there are additional land use district-specific sections within the downtown, Bellevue, East Main, and Wilburton. So what we're hoping to do for the scope of this LUCA is to align with the new state mandates with the minimum parking, the parking surface materials, stall dimensions, and everything other included within 6015 as well. But also we wish to streamline the parking requirements into a single chapter so that it isn't scattered throughout the LUC and it can be easily found and applied. Tonight, we would like you to also consider the following additional scope options. The first one is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not so much an additional option, but the expansion of parking reform near transit was included within the TOD bill, which is a third one, 1491, I believe. Mm-hmm. And with that one, it did have an immediate requirement to include removing any parking requirements within half mile of any rapid ride or light rail station. So we did include that in here as an item that we would probably want to include together with 6015 and 5184. But on top of that, if you were so inclined, you could also consider removing parking in areas with high transit or frequent transit bus stops. That would be such as 2 to 4 or more trips per hour for 12 or more hours a day. You could also consider taking an additional step forward, expanding a parking reform to effectively eliminate minimum parking requirements. This would be in lockstep together with other municipalities within the state. Bremerton, Shoreline, as well as Port Townsend have all already made this step, so it wouldn't be necessarily us making it first. We would have other municipalities to look towards in terms of how their code has been established in since. Finally, you can also consider having us clarify the treatment of change of use. It is actually an item that we're not allowed to require new development when they have a change of use to have minimum parking requirements. But we can build this out a little bit further. There are other uses such as the restaurant ones that we mentioned earlier, that within areas such as the Soma Towers, if you were to have a restaurant that currently uses 15 spaces or so, a new change of use might allow that to reset, go down to that 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and free up some space that is currently being used either for new development within the space itself, or even for just allowing for greater land use itself for spaces that aren't used then. So for this, we are going to be using our process for requirements. We will be doing notices as well as holding a public hearing. We are planning to have direct engagement with info sessions as well as meeting with residents, with neighborhood associations and the development community. We have already kind of begun our online presence with the city webpage, I believe, being started as of Friday, correct? Yeah. And we are also developing an info sheet and FAQs. And we have a blurb that has been established for the newsletters as well, the It's Your City and neighborhood news articles. So here is kind of the draft schedule that we have proposed for this year, and that is going to be following this initiation beginning in February. We are going to begin our community outreach, start talking with the community and getting everything together to basically begin doing our drafts. As we're doing our internal discussions, we will begin going to Planning Commission for kind of touching base within the summer. Late summer is what we're hoping to do for that. And then after the draft has kind of had a look over by Planning Commission and the public, then we can kind of prepare for getting the final approval by early fall and get this back to you guys for final approval by hopefully no later than December. Again, that deadline of January 27th will come up very quickly. So we want to make sure we get this done in orderly fashion. So again, we want to kind of ask for your consideration. I know that was a lot of info. So just consider additional scoping options that we've discussed. And if you can allow the Planning Commission to initiate the work on parking reform, Luca. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, Nick, and Sean. Welcome, and you did a great job. I like that you just clearly talk about the state requirements, but also about additional opportunity that we have as a body. It's really not a compliance, although it is a compliance, but also is updating a code that, as you mentioned, is maybe for a city that we don't have that city anymore, and we have much better city. Let's just start with Councilmember Bargava.
Okay, thank you. Great presentation, very interesting topic. Has lots of impacts on lots of people. Whether you park or you take transit or whether you're a developer or business, it matters to everyone. So I think it's really important. When I started to think about this, over the weekend, when we started to talk about how, what should be the scope and how we think about it, I said, are minimum parking requirements a good thing or not? And I'm not entirely convinced they're a good thing and that it sort of impacts the direction, at least my point of view on the scope for the study. I mean, they do raise costs for development, housing costs. I know there is also a question of, not matching real demand. We heard Jesse Clausen talk about sort of an industrial parcel where demand versus actual requirements are not matching up. And if we're stuck to those sort of approaches that are not flexible over time, that it creates those hard and fast requirements that don't, seem to work. The other thing that I think that we have to think about is the impact they have on actual development potential. And I think that needs to be part of our consideration set as we think about what's the right outcome for minimum parking requirements. And, especially on small land constrained parcels, it has a huge impact, and we have to be really thoughtful and judicious about what our requirements are if we're going to go and do this once and try to get it right for many years to come. And ultimately, at some ways, philosophically, they discourage the achievement of our climate goals and transit utilization. So those are sort of some of the pillars with which to think about, not the scope, but what we're trying to achieve here in its sort of larger picture. I also started to put together like 4 or 5 key principles within which to work, and I'm just going to lay them out for you. Then I have a couple of thoughts for questions for you, or suggestions really for scoping to answer the specific question we're here. One, I would say build, whatever we build out, I think flexibility has to be a core tenet for that. Because I think over time, whatever we build is going to feel antiquated at some point to somebody, and we're going to be sitting here doing the same conversation. Second, I think a market-driven approach will be really, really helpful, which is where, I lean in terms of thinking about this. People who build for utilization of retail, commercial, residential uses typically will follow what the market does, and that on its own creates agility and adaptability over time. I think pricing the curve should be part of our thinking and making it correctly. So demand-based pricing for, spillover parking, I think that's really important. And then thinking about shared parking requirements across uses or adjacencies is another principle to think about. And lastly, I would say anything that we do, we adjust and learn over time, because that has to be part of the mantra we take here. So to going back to the things you laid out, I would be supportive of looking at removing, it's already part of what we're being asked to do, half-mile around transit. I think the frequent transit question that you raised, I think reduction in parking is something we should do sort of an assessment on. This is a scoping exercise. We're not giving answers that are right and wrong, but I do think we should consider reduction in those, because of the same goals that I laid out sort of in the pillars for which minimum parking should stand up to over time. And then the last thing I would say is removing parking needs altogether and transitioning to a market-based approach are two ends of that spectrum. And I would love for our scoping exercise to include the puts and takes by use for that, because we have to normatively plan minimum requirements because the market's not going to create that. And for others, there is a chance that we may be going too far by setting standards. So by use and by as much stratification as seems reasonable would be the suggestions I have for scoping. That's it.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. I really like what Councilmember Bhargava said. I agree with his flexibility, market-driven, and shared parking ideas, so I appreciate that. I'm all for, obviously, the staff minimum recommendations. I'm curious, though, if those recommendations are going to address the concerns that we heard from Jessie Clausen, because she brought up some really good points. So is the minimum enough to address that or not? That's my first question. Then I have to say that there are some things the state is assuming that I just don't agree with. I don't agree that 4-bedroom, low-income housing necessarily does not require parking. And that troubles me, because we've seen some of our affordable housing families really struggle. I also don't agree that senior housing doesn't require parking. We're not talking about the seniors. We're talking about all the people who come and serve them, who are dependent on cars for their businesses. So that's troublesome to me, and I almost wonder if we shouldn't push back a little bit. I know it's already a done deal, but maybe there could be a revision made if our intergovernmental staff were to think that was a good idea. Last thing, could you put slide 15 up, please? So is this one? Yeah, additional scope options. So yes to number 1, yes to number 3. Number 2, I really feel like that should be based on conversations with our transit agencies and doing a qualitative analysis, because you can be really close to transit, but it could be totally uphill. Or it could be, just, we have to think of the reality of people being able to have a family and go get groceries using transit. And I don't want to negate their ability to have a car when they need a car. So I'd like to, instead of just across the board, I'd like to look at those two things. Can we bring more transit options to the area, and is it like topographically feasible for people?
And then, thank you, Councilmember Robinson, for those questions and comments. For the first question around the public comment received on the change of use challenges, and the example that was provided is that there's often times when a use will transition. It might have been a retail shop and they'd like to get a restaurant in there. Retail parking has a lower demand ratio in our code than a restaurant parking, and so that oftentimes kind of bars the door for a restaurant to enter because there's not adequate parking supply, because they have to basically go retail to match the parking that's already provided in the project. The baseline scope that staff is recommending does not address that concern. Item 3 on this additional scope option would give us the ability to take a look at how we might clarify those change of uses and address those situations. And then I also just want to note, and I think Sean had mentioned this earlier, and I believe we've mentioned it to you all before as well, that developers are always going to be able to provide parking regardless of what we say as the requirement. So if we put 0 as the requirement, which in our downtown has been the requirement for commercial uses and for residential uses since at least 2017. And I know in the downtown core, 0 parking for residential has been the rule since even before 2017. And we are seeing the market is providing parking. We know that there is still a market for it. People drive, and people will want to have the opportunity to park where they live, or park in a place that they visit. So a lot of that self-selecting will still continue to happen.
Excuse me, can I clarify, is that true with affordable housing though? Do you think, especially when we do the 30 to 60% AMI, would you say that that's true there also?
I think that's something we can look into to see what the actual parking demand is in those types of units.
Okay.
Right now, the flexibility is for those parking, or for affordable housing to have reduced parking. The logic is more on reducing the cost to deliver affordable housing.
I get that.
Versus maybe that end user experience, which is what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah, okay, go on.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, yeah, sorry. The other aspect of the comment that was received earlier was encouragement, it sounded like, for council to explore additional scope option item 2, which is to look at elimination of parking citywide.
Got it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Councilmember Robinson. Thank you so much, Councilmember Breyer.
Thank you for the thorough presentation, and congrats on your first presentation. It can be often intimidating, but you nailed it. So I'd like to start by saying I really believe good policy is rooted in excellent data. It is derived from logically consistent principles, and lastly, it ought to be scalable. Personally, I'm not a fan of the state mandates and how prescriptive they can be at times. Nevertheless, I do think we need to expand our scope, especially if we're seeing continued investments into our transit infrastructure and if we're hurting our local businesses. I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs who can't just seem to settle in Bellevue because the minimum parking mandates are not feasible. And who knows, maybe it'll enable more dance halls like they did in the 60s. But it is important that we understand through the engagement and evaluation process what other cities are doing and how these impacts are prevailing. So yes to number 1 and to number 3. For number 2, I'm leaning yes, though I'd like to see a technical analysis for number 2 of the potentially expanded scope and what are the impacts that adjacent cities are seeing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being so concise. I appreciate it. Councilmember Neuenhuis.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Rebecca, Nick, and Sean. Welcome.
Great presentation. I'm all for pushing back against the state mandates. 100% agree with Councilmember Robinson on that. I had some questions regarding that, or concerns regarding that as well. In terms of what we're looking at here, so no one, I guess, number one, having concerns about, but number two and number three, yes to that. Councilmember Bargava, I think, is absolutely right in terms of, I think, going into this, letting the market really dictate and determine how much parking is truly needed in our city. Businesses know how much they need in terms of parking. And I think if some space doesn't have the amount of parking that they need, they don't need to sign a lease there, and they can look for another space. I also think that giving property owners the ability to pivot and have that flexibility and the options there to create more or less as they need, as well as allowing those businesses to operate there, is critical as well. I'm not sure it led to the downfall of the dance halls, but it has led to the downfall of some restaurants that truly want to be in this city, but can't for one of litany of different reasons, but parking being one of them. And I appreciate some of the comments that we heard tonight, and I admit I was unaware that if Bellevue still requires 16 stalls per every 1,000 square feet in a restaurant, that just doesn't, live up to, I think what today we need. As you rightly pointed out in your great presentation, we haven't looked at this since 1962. However, I do appreciate the wonderful Lake Hills poster there of my community leading the parade. I'm not sure what that means, but it's a great poster I haven't seen before. So thank you for including that in the presentation. Now, removing the residential visitor stall requirement, I think, is also long overdue. I think that's kind of a holdover as well that we should take a look at. I think we definitely need to take that citywide approach. Let's modernize while we're doing this. I think for most times we try and do that in terms of looking at the entire code and how it's going to affect the entire city. So if we're gonna look at this and lift up the hood and look at updating this, let's do it the right way and look at the entire city. I know that there was also some concern or interest about visitor parking downtown. Will that be a part of this work, or is that going to be a part of the downtown livability work?
The plan would be to address it as part of this work.
Part of this work?
Yes.
Okay,
And
terrific.
that's sooner than the downtown mobility 2.0.
Okay. And then on slide number 7, what did you mean by auto-oriented outcomes? I was just curious if you can give us an example of that.
Yeah, so the council, the city has done a lot of work to update how we want people to get around the city, including adoption of the multimodal implementation plan, and then looking at all of our TOD areas and trying to transition those to more of the transit-oriented communities, or more emphasis on walking, biking, other modes. And so having higher minimum parking requirements citywide, even in the downtown, it's not 16 to 1,000 for restaurants in downtown, it's only 10 per 1,000, which is still really high.
That is, thank you.
So even in places like our downtown, we're seeing these parking requirements might reinforce more people to drive to get to these locations when they're in areas that are more suitable for walking. And so that's really what we're trying to get out with this change, is that this could create policy outcomes that align with what the council has decided is right in that 2044 vision for Bellevue.
Okay. And then my last request is that, and a perfect example of it, the amount of feedback and even media coverage that we got when we went into the curb pricing. I think a lot of residents will be, when they know that curb price is going to lead to charging for parking, that got a lot of coverage. So I think when residents find out about this type of work, I think there's going to be strong interest. So just really want to encourage you to do a lot of extensive outreach. I know you've got some of the direct engagement tactics that you have on here, but please reach out to every neighborhood association. Let's not be passive. Let's really make sure that they understand this conversation is happening, and if they have concerns, we want to hear it, because I really want to make sure they're part of this conversation. And I know you do a great job, but this is just one of them that I just think that once people find out more about, they're going to want to be engaged and really want to lend their voice to this conversation and be a part of that policy decision that we're going to be talking about here over the next year. So, but with that, great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Newhouse. Councilmember Smadavira.
Great work, by the way. I think I love the whole concept that I don't have to pay for my parking in my rent each month. I think it's really amazing for any kind of restaurant to hear that, because we know that if the cost going to the developer is passed through out to the tenants, either it's commercial or residential, so lower cost for everything adds the affordability for start a business or raising a family. I would say that, I think that that's going to be really create a better margin for street level brick and mortar. And then I think it's level C activation, that type of tenants to be having the street activation. It's going to be more inviting, that people don't park, but they walk, they see each other, see faces. Hopefully we don't have any Seattle freeze in here in Bellevue because of that. I think it's going to be amazing. So can I have some questions on slide number 15? So number 3, that by saying clarifying treatment for change of use or tenant transition, is that directly going to be expedite the permit process when somebody is applying for a TI improvement?
If the council directs this as an additional scope option, what this would do is just help us clarify what that change of use parking demand is going to be, which could have the effect of helping streamline some of the land use review, because right now, oftentimes one of the first comments is, what's the amount of parking that the building has, how much is assigned to each tenant, and how much is available for you. And so if we can standardize that process a bit more, that would have kind of an ancillary effect of helping to streamline the process. So yeah, I think it could serve that purpose.
Thank you. That's really great news. And my second question was actually, I have the same worry about the affordable housing, and then my other worries about the childcare area have no minimum parking, because I think that safety should be the first priority, especially in the affordable housing and also childcare zone. As a working mom, what the pickup time is the golden hour. That 5 minutes makes a huge difference. The line, how your mood is, how you start the day, sometimes could be really dangerous when more aggressive parents need to get to work in that meeting, right? So is it possible for us to revisit that and then maybe add some clarification, based on the safety of childcare affordable housing? Because I think one example, I would say that if one of my friends who live in Polaris and they park their car because there's a childcare center right next to it, if the tenant have to walk a long time with a young kid in the dark trying to get there because no parking, and that I think would not be ideal. Mm-hmm. Can we revisit that and think about what can we do to protect our residents in that situation?
Yeah, so the two use types that you'd cited, affordable housing and childcare, are the ones that the state does preempt us on. We can't require parking for those uses. One thing to keep in mind, or just for information, right now we do not have a parking requirement for childcare centers. It's categorized as unspecified use. And so what we do is we actually ask applicants to tell us what's the parking demand that you have, because they are, as you noted, pretty unique. Drop-off is kind of the heavy time for parking, but it's also, 10 minutes, if you're lucky, less, to get in and
You're
out.
lucky. Yes, if you're lucky. It's going to be a good day.
And so, yeah, the parking demand for that is quite different. And so I don't expect we'll see a big shift from how people are operating, because that's kind of the current scheme that we have now for childcare use. And then the affordable housing piece, as we noted, we are preempted. I did, Councilmember Robinson, reach out to our intergovernmental relations team just to note that that was a comment that might be raised. So maybe more to come from them if there's any word in Olympia on revisiting. But for now, we are preempted.
Okay, I'm with Councilmember Robinson on that too. And one last question is on the engagement part, for the direct engagement, is there any possibility that we can also engage the small business, especially restaurant owners, in the community, so get some feedback on how they actually see it. Because I think depend the audience and then the market they're trying to search, it could be completely different needs. So if it's like very vibrant cafe, maybe they don't need the parking. Or it's something very classic or something take along to fine dining, which we love to have in Bellevue, it could be very different, right? So is it possible for us to include them at an engagement process as well?
Yeah, we will certainly try and reach all those different stakeholders, including small business owners.
Especially the restaurants.
And yes.
Thank
and
you.
Appreciate any support you can have in helping us get an audience.
We will, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the presentation. I think this is very important work. Sean, welcome. You rocked it tonight, so thank you for that. I think the proposed scope looks good. I'm especially interested to see what they come back with for design and operational standards. I think the discussion up here has been really solid tonight, so I'm pretty much in alignment with all of my colleagues. Councilmember Bhargava mentioned a few of the things that I have on my list, so I'll just go through it quickly, but definitely interested in finding out if parking requirements could be completely eliminated in some areas under some certain circumstances. Interested also too in having the Planning Commission explore removal of parking requirements within the 1/2 mile of light rail or rapid ride and reducing parking in other areas that are well served by transit. And also, as they're going through the works, I have some concerns around safety for folks. So I'm hoping that the review process could consider the safety of walkers, bikers, rollers, and be mindful of potential safety implications as parking minimums are reduced, and consider the context such as access to transit, sidewalks, and bike facilities. I think the engagement plan looks solid. I agree with Councilmember Neuenhouse. This is going to be an issue of real interest to folks as we go through it. So I'm just curious what the best way is for community members to receive regular updates on the parking reform, Luca.
Yeah, great question. So we do have a webpage, as Sean noted. We stood at that webpage up last week, and then we have a newsletter that we've been sharing now. And so there was a newsletter that was sent out last week that included a link to the project page, which has Sean's contact information. We also are encouraging people to subscribe to that newsletter. We have, it just started, I think we're in our second month of it, and we have around 4,300 subscribers, I think, when we checked this week. So hoping to kind of build that subscription list so that people can be more engaged on our code work that's happening. So that's one way, and the webpage has a way to subscribe. And then any comments that are received by Sean, he'll make sure people are aware of the hearing and kind of the process for requirements that gets them in on getting the notifications there.
Okay, great, thank you. Seems like a great start, ready to move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Great job, great conversation. We are hearing a lot about kind of removing all of the minimum, and I think the goal is to reduce the cost of development and support housing. I hope that we also address the community anxiety that if we remove all of these parkings, then is going to push to the neighborhood. As both Councilmember Neuenhouse and Deputy Mayor mentioned, we need to engage with the neighborhood, and hopefully we have creating some tools to address those issues that will come if we remove all of the parking requirements. The other thing is I would hopefully we all going to track if all of these changes happen. Are they actually helping with the housing development, with the affordable housing, and not doing those unintended consequence that is going to pressure the surrounding neighborhood with all of those cars are going to park there. And hopefully when we do all of this study, we do have a baseline of what are the parking's behaviors, where are the parking is full, where are underuse, and how they varies across the city. So it seems we have all agreement, and if you go back to this, just nod your head. I think everyone wants the additional scope option. There are some additional recommendation about number 2, like the uphill, the low hill, how people are going. Yeah, so you just add some of those, and maybe the transit is going to be more there or not. So we need more study, but it seems nodding head. Everyone agrees with the whole additional scope options. Everyone, great. So then we need a motion. Do I have a motion?
I move to direct staff to initiate work on the parking reform LUCA and direct the planning commission to review and process the LUCA.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? There is no one. Motion passed, and it's perfect time. Thank you so much again. It is time to take a break. We will come back by 7:40. Thank you so much. We are back. And City Manager, would you please introduce the second study session, Multi-Family Tax Exemption Program Update?
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Multifamily Tax Exemption Program, more easily said as the MFTE program, which you'll hear a lot tonight, is something that we have been working on here for almost 9 months probably. The last presentation to council was in early October, I believe. And at that point, staff brought you some concepts for making some adjustments to the MFTE program to pair with the land use changes in Wilburton and also to improve the effectiveness and scope of this tool that is used for both affordable housing and to provide some incentives for development. The work continued after that session, and I want to thank the stakeholders who worked very diligently with our staff to evaluate the scope of the potential updates. And what you have in front of you today that staff will review is a package of changes to the MFTE program that has been generally accepted and also comes with the commitment, as you heard earlier, for staff to continue to work with our stakeholders through the land use code changes that will come this year related to the HOMA work and Bell Red. So we have Bianca Siegel, our Director of Office of Housing, and Robin Zhao, our Affordable Housing Program Manager, here to review the recommended package of changes and are seeking your direction to consider the proposed updates. So I'll hand it over to Bianca.
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. We're really glad to be back before you with the MFTE update. Robin is going to lead us through the presentation this evening. Just want to highlight this is a really important tool in our toolbox for supporting housing development, and particularly development that includes affordable housing units in it as well. It is not the only tool, but it is one that has been effective for the city in the past and promises to be even more effective moving forward. And we'll take you through those proposed changes, and happy to hear your feedback.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. As Bianca mentioned, we've been really working hard with stakeholders over the past few months to come up with this updated set of recommendations that you'll hear tonight. And we also will summarize the key strike draft elements for your direction. So we will start with an overview, just a reminder of what the MFT program does, dive into our updated recommendations, and then talk a bit about what we're hearing from stakeholders along with some updated analysis. And then again, we'll end with the strike draft and next steps. So starting with overview of our MFTE program, you might remember this little graphic from the previous study session. This diagram just shows the three high-level considerations that go into our evaluation of changes to the MFTE program. Of course, we're thinking about how the changes advance our affordable housing goals, MFTE is also a very strong development tool, so also thinking about how it affects development feasibility and helps stimulate development. And then, of course, there's the program cost aspect. We know that there can be a tax impact from MFTE in potentially raising taxes on other property owners, as well as leading to foregone revenue for the city. So Bellevue currently offers the 12-year MFTE program. Again, that's a 12-year property tax exemption on the value of qualifying residential improvements for new multifamily properties. In exchange, we generally require that 20% of units are reserved at 80% of area median income for those 12 years. As a reminder, area median income is calculated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's the point at which half of households earn more and half earn less in a given geographic area. And the 12-year program can be used across the city in all areas zoned for multifamily use. Taking us through what the process has looked like. Again, over the past year, we've been working on this suite of updates to align with recent land use code amendments and add more options for the MFTE program. So back in May, we started some outreach, conducted individual interviews as well as presentations. We worked with an external consultant, Burke, to help us really assess program changes, and that also led to this series of stakeholder technical workshops where we really refined that analysis. And then since our last study session, have been continuing those discussions to come up with the package that you'll see here today. So diving into that package, I'll start with just an overview here of all the things that we're going to talk about. A lot of these remain the same from the recommendations that we brought forth back in October. So that includes the Wilburton Supercharger, the Wilburton 8-year programs. We're introducing this new 20-year home ownership program and expanding MFTE to conversion projects. And then also we talked about some code language updates to align with the land use code. Since we've been talking with stakeholders over the past few months, we also have a few new recommendations that you'll see here. That includes this automatic 8-year program that'll be paired with inclusionary zoning. We'll talk about some changes to the parking requirements for MFTE, and then just some additional administrative changes to make the process work better. Want to note that there are 2 items that we are not recommending at this time, and that includes the citywide supercharger and the 12-year extension, and we'll revisit those 2 items a bit later in the presentation. But I'll start by diving into our recommendations, starting with the Wilburton Supercharger, which we continue to recommend. Again, what this allows for is for a property to double count their mandatory units towards the MFTE requirements without the 15% reduction in AMI that we would otherwise require for those double counted units. So specifically in Wilburton, for example, a developer would restrict 10% of their units at 80% AMI to meet the baseline mandatory requirements. Then if they wanted to use MFTE on top of that, under the existing rules, they would add an additional 10% of units at 65% AMI for 12 years. Now, with the supercharger, those additional 10% of units can remain at 80% AMI. And in either case, after the end of those 12 years, those extra MFTE-specific units revert to market rate. We had also discussed adding these new 8-year options for Wilburton. As a reminder, there's a few different compliance options for on-site mandatory housing. Of course, 10% at 80% AMI is one option. Developers can also choose to restrict 7% at 60% AMI or 5% at 50% AMI. So the supercharger really pairs well with that 80% AMI option that you see on the left-hand side. What we're introducing here are new 8-year programs where in exchange for a slightly higher number of units affordable at 60 and 50% AMI for the life of the project, then a property could receive this 8-year tax exemption. And that is another option that developers will have in addition to the supercharger, but is really meant to help incentivize some of these other mandatory performance options. The 20-year home ownership program, this would provide a 20-year tax exemption in exchange for permanently affordable home ownership units. This specific program is really geared towards our nonprofit home builders such as Habitat for Humanity. We'll be explicitly allowing for conversion projects to use MFTE in addition to new construction, so just expanding the types of projects that can benefit from MFTE. And we'll also be making some changes again to the code language to make sure that affordable units created under MFTE are subject to the same requirements and operate under the same definitions as the land use code. So those were all recommendations that we've brought forth before, and now I'll get into some of the new recommendations, starting with this 8-year program option that'll be paired with future inclusionary zoning. So this is really in response to some requests that we've heard from stakeholders for the Wilburton 12-year supercharger to be applied automatically across the city wherever there's a new future inclusionary zoning requirement. So we're not recommending that at this time, but we are very supportive of an expanded 8-year program as it does meet those lower AMI needs and provides affordable units for the entire life of the project. So it's very similar to the 8-year program that we've designed in Wilburton. You'll notice that the set-asides here are a bit higher, and the reason for that is that in Wilburton, the 8-year option is calibrated to be competitive or an alternative to the supercharger. Since the 12-year supercharger won't be available automatically in these new areas, we've calibrated it a bit differently. We also recommend a change to our parking requirements. This is a request we've heard from some market rate developers. Currently, for under MFTE, we don't require reserved parking spots for MFTE tenants, but we do, what we do is if an MFTE renter does choose to rent a parking spot, they are entitled to a 30% discount. Right now, there's an exemption for downtown projects, and we are recommending that we expand this exemption to all projects within half a mile of frequent transit. This would be an extra incentive to use MFTE, lowers the ongoing costs of using it, so helping incentivize MFTE in those TOD areas. We recognize that, the parking discount may incentivize MFTE renters to drive cars where other transit options are available. So this is also consistent with those efforts to increase transit usage. Okay, lastly, again, this is more of an administrative change. We'll be adjusting the timing of our application process just so that it's more aligned with the land use timing. So just making sure that instead of having two separate sets of documents and timelines, that it's kind of one consolidated process. Overall, we believe that this package of recommendations represents a balance between some of the different things we've been hearing from stakeholders. So I'll dive into some of the key themes that we've been hearing through our engagement process between market rate and affordable housing developers alike. One, it is a challenging multifamily development environment, regardless of MFTE. Interest rates remain elevated and construction costs are up there as well. Those are things we don't have control over, but MFTE is one tool that the city has to kind of help projects pencil. So we have heard a desire specifically to, again, link MFTE with any potential future mandatory inclusionary zoning so that it can be kind of another cost offset in addition to some of the incentives provided under the land use code. So this may help encourage housing development in these areas. And we've continued to hear interest in these two specific items, the citywide supercharger, as well as the 12-year extension for existing MFT projects. So specifically in response to that request to kind of link MFTE to potential mandatory affordability requirements, we are committed to going forward, evaluating MFTE alongside these land use code amendments. So Development Services already does their own analysis when it comes to kind of finding this balance of incentives and requirements. So what we're going to do is kind of layer in our analysis for MFTE on top of that. And if we find that changes are warranted, then we'll go ahead and present those changes at the same time the LUCA is presented to the council, along with the strike-through draft of that change. And if we find that changes are not recommended, then the agenda materials will include that analysis and our recommendation there. So the goal really is to have these kind of two areas of incentives move in tandem rather than kind of one after another, which was the case for Wolverton. And this analysis is already in progress for Homa and for Belred. Again, we believe that this package of recommendations really strikes a balance of stakeholder priorities. First and foremost, we will be implementing the Wolverton Supercharger, which was a key item that was brought up during those Wolverton-LUCA discussions. We're also providing that 8-year MFTE option that'll be paired with mandatory affordability. Removing some of our parking requirements to help reduce costs for MFTE, and then again aligning some of the processes between the MFTE and land use code, just for consistency and clarity. Of course, MFTE is not a static program, so we're already kind of looking towards the next steps, most immediately, again, pairing MFTE and LUCA economic analysis for future affordability requirements. And then we're already planning to come back to you all by 2029, specifically to adopt some recent changes from the last legislative session, but that'll also be an opportunity for us to look at the changes that we make as part of this update, see how it's going, and see if any changes should be made there. Now I'll dive into those two specific items that we are not recommending at this time, but that stakeholders have been focused on, and that's the citywide supercharger and the 12-year extension. So starting with the citywide 12-year supercharger, again, what that would do is just extend the same Wolverton supercharger program automatically wherever mandatory affordability is expanded. So we've continued to look at this change, evaluate its impact in terms of affordable housing, development feasibility, and the fiscal impacts. And our recommendation is consistent with what we mentioned at the previous study session, which is that we do not recommend adopting a citywide 12-year supercharger at this time. In terms of our affordable housing production goals, a citywide supercharger would really concentrate production of the 80% AMI units. For reference, that's about $88,000 for one person, about $100,000 for a household of two. 80% AMI units are really important in terms of our overall affordable housing supply, but we do know that 80% AMI is about currently market rate, especially for the smaller unit types. And we already know we have a really robust pipeline of 80% AMI units. Meanwhile, we also know that MFT households earn, on average, 56% of AMI, so there is a need for those deeper affordability levels. In terms of housing production, more generally, MFTE is a really powerful tool, and a citywide supercharger could definitely increase the value of that incentive. As Bianca mentioned, it is one tool among many factors and levers affecting development. It's a tool that we use to encourage development, but is also meant to provide that affordable housing. We find that the existing MFTE program continues to do well in balancing those two goals. But we also recognize that the Wilburton Supercharger is this further unique incentive to really spur development in this brand new neighborhood. Also, the supercharger concept only applies alongside mandatory affordability, which is currently limited to Wilburton. So as new neighborhoods look at mandatory affordability, that might look different from what's in Wilburton or come with different additional changes alongside that requirement. So we want to make sure we're kind of looking at this at a case-by-case basis and really make sure that the program changes match up with some of the other land use changes. So when considering the citywide supercharger, again, going back to our key policy considerations, it wouldn't necessarily meet those lower AMI targets where the need is greatest. It's definitely an added incentive for development, so definitely worth examining in different contexts as these LUCAs come across and different neighborhoods are looking at mandatory inclusionary zoning. And then we also know that there are program costs that come with MFTE. We know that the citywide supercharger provides somewhat of a limited benefit to MFTE renters compared to the existing program and will increase those public costs over time. So for those reasons, we are not recommending expanding the Wilburton supercharger citywide at this time. We've also heard some desire for a 12-year extension to be adopted now that would allow for a property to receive up to 24 years of the MFTE tax exemption. I'll note that our first expiration isn't until December of 2031, so we do have a bit of time on this item. Our recommendation here continues to be to not adopt the 12-year extension at this time. And looking at our policy considerations, in terms of our affordable housing goals, the extension could definitely be a powerful affordable housing preservation tool, but it really depends on how that extension program is designed, which is something that we feel is better done once we're closer to that first expiration and have some more concrete data on hand. It's not creating new housing units, so not directly contributing to new housing production. And it does come with some pretty significant public costs, which we'll turn to now. So we have worked with finance and asset management to project the fiscal impacts of MFTE over time. So this graph here is showing how MFTE is expected to increase the property taxes for the median Bellevue homeowner over time. This projection, you'll see, goes all the way out to 2050. A lot can happen between now and then. So this is using our best assumptions right now based on King County assessor data and as well as our own historical trends. This will certainly change over time. So this is something that we're going to continue to revisit as we get more information. So the orange line here is kind of our base case for the future, assuming that MFTE participation continues in line with what we've seen over the recent years. This takes into account the pipeline of projects that we know about today. So you can see, for example, this year in 2026, we expect an annual tax shift of about $25, and by 2050, we'll see that this will grow to $255. Now, on this slide, we're layering in the citywide supercharger, which is shown in blue. With the citywide supercharger, we expect participation in the MFTE program to increase, resulting in additional shifted taxes. So by 2050, we estimate a 20% greater tax shift compared to the baseline in orange. So that's the tax shift component. Of course, there's also the foregone tax component, and we're estimating about $2 million in lost annual property tax revenue for the city in 2050 as a result. And lastly, here's the 12-year extension. Again, the orange line is our base case. Now with properties doubling the length of that extension, of that exemption, we see a pretty significant increase in shifted taxes, up 70% by 2050 compared to our baseline, and about $3.4 million in foregone taxes. So these fiscal impacts, there's something that we want to be considering now, even though we might not see the direct impact over the next 5 years. Over time, this effect definitely grows and is part of the reason why we kind of want to be measured in introducing these new program elements. Lastly, we'll touch on the key strike draft elements and next steps. So to quickly summarize our recommendations tonight, we have the Wilburton 12-year supercharger and new 8-year programs. We have the new 20-year homeownership program and an expansion of MFTE for conversion projects. We have that new 8-year program that'll be paired automatically with future inclusionary zoning. And we have the new TOD parking exemption. And lastly, we have these process improvements to better align MFTE with the land use code. And then on the right-hand side, what we're not recommending at this time, again, is that automatic citywide supercharger and the 12-year extension. This is just another way to organize those recommendations, kind of looking at it by geographic area. So starting on the left-hand citywide, we'll have the existing 12-year program. That's not changing. We'll have the new 20-year homeownership program, and now we'll be able to have conversion projects use MFTE. And then moving on to Wilburton, we have these new Wilburton-specific programs, including the Wilburton Supercharger and that new 8-year program. And then now on the right-hand side, looking at any potential future inclusionary zones. To start, they will have the existing 12-year program, so they'll be able to use that. And they'll have this new 8-year program that we've designed for areas outside of Wilburton. So just to end on our policy considerations again, we believe that this update contributes to our affordable housing goals. We have these new 8-year programs that are really trying to incentivize some of the lower AMI levels. We're introducing a 20-year home ownership program to incentivize not only rental housing, but home ownership. And then we're also making changes that improve development feasibility. Of course, the new Wilburton Supercharger, as well as expanding the types of projects that can use MFTE. We're reducing certain parking requirements and just improving overall program administration. And we've been mindful of the cost of the program, so really trying to limit some of the adverse fiscal impacts that we might see down the line, and making sure we're really balancing the benefits between both renters and developers. So for our next steps, following code adoption based on council direction tonight, we'll continue to stay close to the upcoming LUCAs and evaluate MFTE hand in hand. And again, we'll be back by 2029 at the latest to assess these changes and recommend any further improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca, Robin. Thank you so much, and the whole team for amazing work. Thank you, the consultant as well. The amount of work, listening, collaboration you guys have done is completely shown in the work in your presentation. Also, all of the material that is online. Before I open it up to my council colleagues, I also want to thank our partners, stakeholders, East Side Housing Roundtable, EHR, and Plush, HDC, and other partners who helped inform this work and get us to this point. Councilmember Breyer.
Is it because I'm concise all the time?
That's exactly.
Thank you, folks, for the thorough presentation. I wanted to say, it is absolutely imperative that we see the most amount of supply created the quickest. I do believe that the policies we pass have to enable housing production the same day it is passed. Now, I understand that that's an incredibly ambitious statement, but it is something that I think we have to comport ourselves towards, especially in the midst of a housing crisis. I want to quickly bring light to the work conducted to minimize the gap between the processes and propping up one consolidated process. I think this is great. These efficiency gains will help everyone across the entire vertical of housing. Removing the discount for MFTE renters near transit centers, I think makes sense because it lowers the ongoing cost of development, but also enables the walkability and human-centered design. I understand that was a huge trade-off for some of our stakeholders, but I do think it is logically consistent with some of our other policies. And then on slide 30, I wanted to call out, I appreciate the fiscal responsibility and limiting adverse fiscal impacts so that we build affordable housing without really heavily burdening our middle-class residents, families, teachers, renters, and so on. So that is the only feedback that I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You are going to be number one if you continue like this, concise. Councilmember Robinson.
Thank you. Really appreciate the work, Really appreciate the work that you staff have done on this. This is a very complex topic, and we have a lot of new council members who are totally up to speed tonight because of all the work that you've done. So thank you. Appreciate the stakeholders' input as well, and that you were able to work with them. Let's see. The new TOD parking exemption within half a mile of frequent transit, can we pair that with a qualitative analysis for the same reason that we talked about in the other study session? Just because I don't think that works with every topographical area that we have. So kind of looking at, can we increase bus service in those areas? Can we work with our partners, our transit partners? And is it actually feasible for people to be walking there, or is it really hilly? So some areas are much more conducive to that than others. So I wonder if we can pair that a little bit. I really like this 8-year program. I think it's great. I'd like to trigger it automatically. So if we intend to vote in mandatory inclusionary housing in another area, that this just triggers it so that we can speed it up. I love the 20-year home ownership program. I think that's great. Yes to the covenant contract with the MFTE. And, what's really interesting is you show loss in property tax projection using the recommended MFTE for the city. And it kind of pairs with the rental assistance that we're giving through Human Services. So it would be really interesting to track that and see if the more affordable housing we put in, the less we have to put out in rental assistance. And that is it. Thank you.
Are you looking for response for some of your questions?
Not really.
Not really, just recommendation.
I think, well, the only question I had really was pairing the analysis with the TOD parking exemption within half a mile and just asking if that's possible.
Yeah, just to clarify, the TOD parking exemption is just on the discounted parking rate. It doesn't change the parking requirements at all, but yes, we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Smadaveri.
I think you can like my statement. So I really thank you so much for the statement. And then one thing to call, I appreciate our added flexibility, but I'm really looking forward to the future opportunity, the change, and then because of the data. And then something to call out, that 15 minutes presentation usually takes many, many hours a month of your work. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Wow. Councilman Neuenhaus. No pressure.
Thank you so much for the presentation. As my colleagues have expressed already, very, carefully, thoughtfully, data-driven approach. Really appreciate that. I really appreciate how open both you, Bianca and Robin, have been to all the feedback that you've received. We're so blessed to have organizations like Eastside Housing Roundtable and the Plush Community, et cetera. I mean, the way that they can come together and bring that unified voice that really reflects, a lot of ranges of perspectives, but really focused on the same goal. Of creating more affordable housing, more market rate housing in general, but, a partnership that really kind of goes beyond, their view of ideology, but really focuses on what pencils and creates more inventory. So I just so appreciate that. And I think we're blessed as a community to have organizations like that are giving us such valuable feedback. I have the same concern as Councilmember Robinson, so I would like to see that analysis a little bit more too, if you could follow up with me on that as well, regarding that 30% discount with that half mile, within that half mile frequent transit. Let's see. If the council, I think, and it goes to prior comment about getting this great feedback from the actual folks who are actually going to be building it. Let's really continue to focus on clarity. And going forward, I think, and I believe this was in the letter too, was that MFT updates need to come forward concurrently with rezones, so that incentives and requirements are aligned from the start. I think the more clarity that developers have right at the get-go, at that moment that they make those investment decisions, the better off we all are. I want to get to, love the staff recommendations. The not recommended at this time, just want to dive into that just for a quick second. So as you showed here on slide number 9, so no citywide supercharger nor the 12-year extension. So not at this time. When is a good time? Was it 2029 that you mentioned? Can you give me some thought? And if it is 2029, why 2029? Will we not have enough data in a year or two, but to look at and see, is this working? Is it the way working that we want it to work? Do we need to make some adjustments? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I would say for the 12-year extension, it's helpful to have more time to be closer to that first set of expirations, just because then we can kind of gauge how the market's doing and make sure that our recommendations.
Was that 2031, if I remember?
That's 2031, so
Okay.
2029, I think, by 2029, we're going to have to come back with some new changes to MFTE as required by the state. So that'll be another opportunity. Again, we're going to be kind of continuously assessing how the program's doing, but that'll be, I think, a good time to see what data we have on hand and look towards 2031. For the citywide supercharger, that is going to happen or the analysis that we're going to do on that is going to happen sooner rather than later, again, in line with the upcoming LUCA. So we're going to
Okay.
pair that analysis and make recommendations at the same time those come forward.
Okay. And then one last question on slide, I think it was slide 7, I could be wrong though, about the 56%, 56% of, let's see, of the MFTE, was that right? What was the 56% number coming
Yep.
from?
That's the average AMI.
Yeah, the average AMI,
residents.
thank you. How are we getting to that number?
That is data that Arch helps us collect annually. There's a required annual report from properties where they collect all that information.
From applications that Arch receives, and how often do they look at that data?
Yeah, it's current tenants.
Current
in
tenants?
place, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Bargava?
Okay. I also want to start by just saying kudos to you. I mean, this is remarkable work, very complex. The more you look at what you put together, the more intricate it gets, and the more nuanced the analysis. So really great job to you and to the entire team, as well as, great input from the stakeholders. It's been said before, but it just has to be underlined because it is a labor of love to get this to where we are right now. So thank you. I'll be quick on the first few things. I fully support the supercharger for Wilburton. I also continue to be supportive for the 20-year home ownership and the MFT conversion projects, which I think is a really good thing. I'm supportive of the 30% discount, although I know it can feel a hard thing to residents who are actually taking advantage of the discount right now in the short term. But I think if you think about it more long term, it does incentivize transit use and puts the right framework in place for that. And so it's a hard call, not easy, but I think generally supportive of that. And also of the change you've made for the MFT land use contract process, given especially the director's flexibility that you built into that. So those are great. 3 things that I have some questions on. The first is the 8-year citywide program. I know we're going to 60% and even 50% AMI here. And I said this in my briefing as well. If I understand this correctly, these are equal to, in terms of the returns for the other programs at 80% AMI. Would that be how you framed it and calibrated this?
Yeah, I would say it's designed to be complementary. Obviously, every developer is going to have a different kind of approach. We've tried to make it equal. I think, the idea with the 8-year program was to incentivize the 50 and 60% AMI options under the mandatory requirement so that it's not just the 80% AMI gets the supercharger, but that there's kind of something equal as an incentive for the other kind of compliance requirements.
Yeah, so I only have 2 points on that. One is, and I've said this to you before, so it's not new to you, but it would be great to consider a higher degree of incentive, maybe a lower percentage of units for the deeper AMI, so that there's a chance for that to be built in performance-based housing, which I think is going to be very difficult to achieve otherwise. And the second thing is, have you got feedback from the development community on the feasibility of the 50 and 60% as laid out, and is it resonating?
Yeah, I think with, again, what I've heard from developers is, some like 80% AMI, they don't want to go below that when using MFTE. Others are kind of more focused on, what the burden is of using MFTE with a lower set aside of units. It's less ongoing work in terms of kind of doing the paperwork and screening residents and all of that. So I think what I've heard from developers, it's that it's welcome to have this kind of set of options that they can use. And, as market conditions change, as they look at different projects, they can kind of have a menu of options to look at and consider what works best for them then.
Okay, that's fair. I still feel like sweetening the pot on the other side for the deeper AMI might be something to consider. Definitely feel like that will create a more higher chance of us getting something. Very quickly on this one again, do we have good analogs where mixed income with 50%, 40% have been delivered successfully in other cities at scale? Have you looked at that?
I haven't looked into that locally, but that's a good question, and we can dig into that.
Okay, I'm just curious if you have good examples where developers have come in and built these mixed income. I'm calling them mixed income, just a wider spread of AMI is all, like maybe that's a better way to frame it. So, and then to the other two things that you're not recommending very quickly, on the MFT extension, I do appreciate that you're saying you'll come back when, in 2031, when you look at this. I do believe that there is value. I'm supportive of the extension, and I'm not fully convinced with the analysis that you presented in the package and today as well, that the cost shift is, this is a judgment call really, but I feel like if you have affordable units in play today, where people are actually in those units, for us to then come back in a few years and say now these are no longer affordable, it will create a larger challenge for us on affordability for the city, and something that I feel like we should really consider that. And so you'll have more data by 2031. I'm really encouraged by the openness to the idea of an extension, but I feel like there has to be more analysis here that gives us convincing rationale that removing currently affordable units is the right answer for Bellevue in an environment where creating affordable units is so challenging already. So that's something that I want to sort of state. And then on the supercharger as well, I feel like there are opportunities, and I think you acknowledge that, and especially in places like Bellred, where the urban characteristics are very similar to Wilburton, where I don't think the land economics play out very differently. And so when we do those, I think we should put all of the options, including the supercharger, on the table and see if we can get the right solution there. Because if anything that I've really felt good about is Wilburton is the process of getting the wide stakeholder alignment and the resonance on the policy framework that we put together. And so we should try to leverage that for expansion to other parts of the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Oh, boy. I may be relegated to going last for the foreseeable future, but I will try to get through this as quickly as I can. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the great work you have done here. The leadership you have demonstrated in bringing a wide range of stakeholders together, and the final recommendation that has been produced is noteworthy. Of course, all of you, under the leadership of our city manager, are critical to the success of everything we do in Bellevue, and that is all the more apparent with this MFTE update work you have presented to us tonight. I also want to express my deep gratitude for the work that our critically important partner, the Eastside Housing Roundtable, EHR, has done to help make this update a valuable tool for nonprofit and market rate housing developers. Considering that they are the ones that build our housing, their input is invaluable. I also appreciate all of the effort that my council colleagues have put into supporting and informing the MFTE update. We all clearly recognize that our community is suffering from the lack of available housing and the high cost of the housing they are able to find. And I also think we all share a sense of urgency to act. We need to produce housing options that serve our entire community, and we have produced far less than is needed. Of course, there's a lot more work to do. This update is a critical boost for housing projects that need help getting started earlier in this development cycle. Like EHR and my colleagues, I support the staff's recommendations that are listed on slide 9 and here on slide 34. Just a quick question, if we could look at slide 30 for a second. We have a lot of talk about tax shift, and I just want to be sure that I'm clear that what we're really looking at here is that less than $1 a month on average is going to be the tax shift from MFTE. Is that right? $960 per year between now and 2050.
That's the annual increase per household. That's like the average rate of increase.
$9.60 a year.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, well, I think the tax shift is something that we owe it to all of our community members to take a look at. I think it's important that we keep it in proper context. The supercharger in Wilburton and likely anywhere in the city we have mandatory affordability makes a lot of sense to me. I'm looking forward to future discussions about the possible effectiveness of a supercharger in other neighborhoods. Also looking forward to further discussions on the potential benefit of a 12-year extension. Thank you you also provided some additional information regarding the 3-bedroom units, and I think that the current 15% requirement is sufficient. The strike-through draft in the packet captures all the good work that staff, our stakeholders, and this council want to accomplish with this update. I support moving forward with directing staff to finalize the MFTE code update. Again, thanks to everyone who's participated in this tremendous amount of work. Ready to move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think all of my council colleagues mentioned all of the good stuff. I just have two kind of question comment. One is we talk a lot about feasibility, and that's great, but the real success would be the outcomes. Do we have any rough modeling or estimate that based on each option, how many units are we forecasting to be produced?
Yeah, that's kind of, we do have a forecast. It's presented as part of this tax shift analysis, but we can also parse that out for you.
That would be awesome. I think that gives us a lot of idea what each option, how many units is going to produce, and then because we have a goal as this council, and how far are we if, again, it's going to be a forecast and I know it's a rough estimate. The other question comment is, would be kind of early metrics that you guys recommend to track that we can as a council revisit in a cadence, then adjust each program if we are seeing that the intended goal that is producing affordable housing, that outcome is not coming to fruition?
Yeah, I think there's a few metrics that we want you all to be aware of. One thing that we've tried to get at is the rent savings at each property from using MFTE, and that's a bit harder to keep track of because we have to get all of that data from each property. But that's something that Arch helps us with. So getting that every year could really help paint the picture of, how much rent savings are we getting versus how much property taxes are we exempting. And then kind of more broadly, I would say, definitely want to keep track of the participation rate for MFTE, and especially now that we have all these new options. As Councilmember Bargava was saying, we want to be mindful of what is being used, what's not being used. If we want to encourage one specific program, what changes can we make to make those a bit more attractive?
Great. If you can, again, we can have a very comprehensive metrics that can help us to revisit each topic after introducing some of these options to see the efficacy of them would be great, because we want it to be iterative and see if we can change, modify, update, or stop something that maybe is not working. Thank you so much, and we need a motion.
I move to direct staff to finalize the MFTE code update for final action at a future meeting.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
City Manager, we have a land use reports.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a quasi-judicial item on a site-specific rezone, and given that this is a different type of process for the council, I'm going to turn it over to our city clerk, Charmaine Arredondo, to provide the background, to walk the council through the process, and then Charmaine will be joined in the presentation of the details here by our city attorney, Trisna Tanis, land use director, Tony Pratt, and the senior planner, Waylon Barton from Development Services. So with that, I will hand it over to Charmaine.
Thank you, City Manager and Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. We're happy to be here this evening. So we are here to officially present the administrative record and recommendation of the hearing examiner on a site-specific rezone. This is on for initial consideration. This is a quasi-judicial process, and tonight's session is specifically dealing with an application for a site-specific rezone for a piece of property at 999 118th Avenue Southeast. I'll go over a bit of the agenda that we'll talk about this evening. So we'll go over quasi-judicial process here briefly. We will talk about ex parte communications and any disclosures that the council may have. We'll discuss the council's role in this case and the decision criteria that you must base your decision upon. We will turn it to Development Services to go over a brief staff report that was delivered to the hearing examiner, and then ultimately we'll end with the hearing examiner's recommendation. So with that, I'll start by discussing a little bit of the quasi-judicial process. So this is a very different process than what is typically in front of the council. So usually the council is sitting in a legislative or policy-making role. However, in this case, in quasi-judicial matters, the council acts similarly to a judge or jury in that role, you're applying the existing laws and policies, and in this case, to a specific piece of property rather than the community at large. So additionally, you must make your decision based upon established criteria rather than on policy preferences. And the appearance of fairness doctrine does apply, which is a doctrine, legal standard that applies to quasi-judicial land use decisions. And the city attorney will go over a little bit more of that in detail here in a second. Finally, on this slide, just a reminder that back in 2022, the council did remove themselves from most quasi-judicial processes where there was availability to do so. However, state law does still require that for process 3s, which are the site-specific rezones, that city council is the final decision maker, which is why this is in front of you this evening. Really briefly, won't spend too much time here, but site-specific rezones do have a very specific process that is set out in the code. So there is a notice of application and a minimum comment period is enacted. There is a public meeting that Development Services holds. The Development Services director does make a recommendation to the city's hearing examiner. That examiner does hold a public hearing and then ultimately makes a recommendation to the city council. So at this point, I'll turn it to the city attorney to go through some of the ex parte communications.
Thank you, Charmaine. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. As Charmaine mentioned earlier, the appearance of fairness rules apply because council is sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity or acting like a judge. This means that the proceedings must be fair and unbiased. And in order to comply with these rules, council cannot engage in communications that are outside of this proceeding, so communication with one side or the other of the subject proposal. These communications are often called ex parte communications. If a council member has had ex parte communication, the way to mitigate this is to disclose that communication on the record and then allow the parties on both sides to be able to rebut the substance of that communication. To help meet this obligation, city staff has completed a search of city emails for you all, and nothing has been found about this proposal. But because communication could happen outside of city emails, I wanted to pause here and ask on the record if any of you has had ex parte communication. If so, please disclose the communication at this time. Hearing and seeing none, I'll move on. So next slide. Council's role here is to consider and take action on this rezone application. Tonight is the first part where you are intaking information about the subject proposal. The second part would be to take that final action, which will occur at a future meeting. There are really specific requirements for the process that you have to follow. First, council cannot accept any new information. So no new evidence, nothing, and no solicitation of anything that is outside of the record. And second, council must consider the complete record in front of the hearing examiner, as well as the hearing examiner recommendation. And then lastly, as mentioned earlier, unlike most of the items that come in front of you, this application and the decision that you're making is based on the decision criteria that is in the code. It is not a policy decision, but instead a defined set of criteria. This criteria is, as I said, in the land use code. And in order for you to approve the application with modifications, these 5 criteria must be met. You'll see it on here. We'll spend a little bit more time on this at your next meeting, but wanted to be able to put this up so you can see the kinds of things that the facts should be weighed against in terms of your decision making. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony and Waylon to go through the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council. My name is Tony Pratt, and I'm the Land Use Director in Development Services, and I'm here tonight with Waylon, and we are going to be talking about SRM's rezone. They are going to be rezoning 4.55 acres on 118th Avenue Southeast from office limited business to neighborhood mixed use. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Waylon.
Right, thank you, Tony, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council. As Tony mentioned, my name is Waylon, Senior Planner with the city's Development Services Department and the project coordinator for the SRM rezone, permit number 22-118369LQ. I'm going to run through a presentation that was conducted in front of the hearing examiner back on November 3rd of last year. To start with the project request, it is a rezone of an existing 4.5 acre site. You can see there on the graphic, located off 118th Avenue Southeast. And this request is to go from the existing OLB office limited business zoning to neighborhood mixed use NMU zoning. For some more context, behind the site, 405 there to the east, Mercer Slough southwest, and to the north, there's adjacent commercial as well as the Wilburton Park and Ride just there above Southeast 8th. As we zoom into the site, we see that it currently consists of a 135 unit apartment complex referred to as the Nuovo Apartments, and that's that western building on that upper graphic, and a partially built hotel on the eastern side, both of those labeled there on the top graphic. Surrounding uses are primarily office, light industry, and as mentioned, Mercer Slough 405 also bounds the site. To provide some zoning context, on that upper graphic, we see the subject site. Existing zoning is that OLB office limited business. Surrounding uses mostly comprised of general office and commercial uses. The proposed zoning is NMU, neighborhood mixed use, which is mostly comprised of a mixed use commercial uses and more residential density. The comprehensive plan designation is consistent with the mid-rise mixed use, as you see in that lower graphic, which supports residential density. One thing to note that this site-specific rezone is not triggering any comp plan amendment. This is consistent with the existing future land use map, which again is that lower graphic. To touch upon the rezone process a little bit more, it is a process 3 quasi-judicial city council decision. A little bit of the history with this application. First, land use director did recommend approval to the hearing examiner
That was preceded by an open house meeting, which was conducted initially November 7th of 2022, and subsequently again on February 5th, 2025. There was no attendance from the public or comments submitted for either of those public meeting open houses. The rezone notice was published on October 8th of 2025. And again, no comments received from the public regarding that notice that was issued back in October. Secondly was the hearing examiner public hearing, which was a recommendation of approval to City Council. As mentioned at the beginning, that public hearing for the hearing examiner occurred November 3rd, just last year, 2025. That concludes staff's presentation. I'll hand it back over to Charmaine. Thank you.
City Clerk's Office does oversee the hearing examiner function for the city, so I am going to be presenting the recommendation to you this evening on behalf of the hearing examiner. So the assigned examiner in this case has entered findings of fact and conclusions of law and is recommending approval of this rezone application. And of note, I want to mention that the hearing examiner concluded that the record did include far more than a preponderance of evidence establishing that this rezone application did satisfy all of the applicable established criteria. And then in our final slide here, just a reminder that this is initial consideration this evening, the first touch on this item. The second touch will be at your next meeting on January 27th. The administrative record and hearing examiner recommendation has now officially been delivered to you. You have time over the next 2 weeks to continue reviewing the administrative record so that you are prepared to take action at your January 27th meeting. So the city attorney and I are both here tonight if you have any process-related questions that we can respond to. Development Services staff are certainly here to answer any specific questions, but I do want to remind you that, as we've mentioned tonight, your questions should be limited to just clarifying questions on information that is contained within the administrative record. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for presentation. Thank you for presentation. As we have heard, this is coming back to us in 2 weeks, January 27, for final action. So if you have any question about the process, we have limitations, or clarifying question about everything, please let me know. Raise your hand. There is no question, so we will see this matter back on our agenda on January 27th for final action. Thank you again. We have written reports that I recommend everyone should go and read for information. Again, thank you for joining us. Given the holiday next week, we are canceling our January 20th meeting, and our next meeting will be on January 27th, and we are adjourned. Thank you so much.